Hey everyone, and welcome. We've all heard that you need to water your plants, right? But have you ever wondered if you can actually be a little too caring? It's a huge question, whether you've got a single plant on your windowsill or a 1,000-acre farm. So today, we're going to dive into the science of too much water and what that really means for a crop.
So let's start with the big question. Can a plant literally drown? And the answer is, kinda, yeah. You see, while plants obviously need water to survive, their roots also need to breathe. They pull in oxygen from tiny air pockets in the soil. But when a field gets totally waterlogged, all that water floods those air pockets and chokes off the oxygen supply. It's the classic case of too much of a good thing.
Okay, so how do you actually measure too much? For farmers and scientists, just saying a field is waterlogged isn't quite enough. They need a precise scientific way to quantify that stress so they can actually manage it. And that's where a really specific metric comes into play. It's called a Moisture Surplus Stress Day, or MSSD for short. You can think of it as the official scientific term for one of those drowning days. An MSSD gets counted on any day that the plant's root zone is holding way more water than it can safely handle, which puts that vital oxygen supply at risk. This really breaks it down visually. On one side, you have field capacity. That's the sweet spot, the just right amount of moisture for a healthy, happy plant. But on the other side, you've got surplus. That's the danger zone. That's where all the oxygen gets pushed out. Our whole goal with MSSD is to figure out exactly how many days a crop spends in that dangerous surplus state.
So how do we actually calculate one of these stress days? Well, the easiest way to wrap your head around it is to imagine the soil's root zone is just a big bucket. It's that simple. Our job is to figure out how big the bucket is, and then keep track of all the water going in and out of it every single day.
Step 1. You gotta know the size of your bucket. In technical terms, this is called the total available water, or TAW. It's basically the total amount of water the soil can hold that's actually useful to the plant. You figure it out by taking the field capacity, that's the max it can hold, and subtracting the wilting point, which is when the soil is so dry the plant can't pull water from it anymore. Then you just multiply that by how deep the roots go. Deeper roots, bigger bucket.
All right, next up is the daily bookkeeping. We've got to track our inputs, so things like rainfall and any irrigation. And then we track our outputs. That includes the water the crop itself uses and breathes out, that's called evapotranspiration, and also any water that drains away deep into the ground below the roots, that's called deep percolation.
And this brings us to a really straightforward daily calculation. To figure out how much water is in the bucket today, you just take the water level from yesterday, add your new inputs like rain, and subtract the outputs like what the crop used. That gives us our provisional water level for the day.
But here's a really important detail. We don't want to sound the alarm for every tiny little bit of overflow. So there's what's called a decision rule. We only officially count an MSSD if the excess water is above a certain threshold, let's say 5 millimeters. This basically acts as a filter, so we're only flagging days where the waterlogging is significant enough to actually cause potential harm.
And for anyone who wants to go a little deeper, there's a related metric called Moisture Surplus Stress Units, or MSSU. Now, instead of just asking, was there stress today, which is a simple yes or no, MSSU asks, well, how much stress was there? It actually measures the total millimeters of excess water, so you get a much better sense of the intensity of the stress.
Okay, I get it. Trying to track deep drainage and all that can get pretty complicated. But don't worry, there's a really practical, field-ready shortcut that makes the whole thing a lot simpler. This shortcut is actually pretty clever. You do your daily water balance, and if you find an overflow that's above your threshold, boom, you count 1 MSSD. Then, and here's the key part, you just assume all of that excess water drains away overnight. So, for tomorrow's calculation, you start fresh, with a full bucket, resetting the water level right back to the TAW.
The best way to really get this is just to see it in action. So let's just run through a super quick example with some actual numbers.
Okay, let's walk through this. Imagine our soil bucket started the day with 30 millimeters of water. Then we get a big downpour, 60 millimeters of rain, and we know the crop used up about 17 millimeters. So you just do the math. 30 plus 60 is 90, minus the 17 the crop used, and our provisional water level is 73 millimeters. But here's the thing. For this particular soil, we know our bucket, our total available water, can only hold a maximum of 50 millimeters.
So, if we have 73 millimeters of water in a bucket that can only hold 50, well, that means we have an overflow, an excess of 23 millimeters.
Now we check our rule. Is 23 millimeters greater than our 5 millimeter threshold? Oh yeah, for sure.
And just like that, we've officially counted one moisture surplus stress day. Then, using our shortcut, we just reset tomorrow's starting water level back down to 50. See? Pretty simple, right?
Now, of course, the real world is always a little more complicated. This basic model can be refined and tweaked. You can account for things like a high water table, or you can adjust that stress threshold depending on the crop. Some are more tolerant than others. You can even get more accurate by calculating rainfall runoff. It's a really flexible tool.
And really, this is what it all comes down to. Using metrics like MSSD and MSSU allows us to move beyond just guesswork. The whole point is to precisely measure the stress on a crop, to capture not just how many stressful days there were, but how much of a struggle it was for the plant.
And that really leaves us with a bigger question to think about. I mean, the MSSD is just one tool, right? It's one way of translating the silent language of the environment into data we can actually use. It makes you wonder, beyond just watering, in what other ways can we learn to really listen to what our soil, our plants, and our climate are trying to tell us? Thanks for joining me.